If you ask me how ordinary people actually become wealthy, I would not begin with genius. I would begin with repetition. That answer disappoints almost everyone the first time they hear it. They want something bigger, a breakthrough, a brilliant idea, a product nobody has seen before, a business that looks like a rocket ship the moment it leaves the ground. A market so hot that even a half-awake person can become rich just by getting there early. That is the fantasy. It is also the reason so many hardworking people spend years circling wealth without ever really building it. I have spent most of my life around businesses, operators, capital allocation, and people who thought the missing ingredient was something exciting. The older I get, the less impressed I become with businesses that need to look impressive. I care more about businesses that keep collecting money when no one is looking. That is a very different standard. It is also the standard that separates noise from cash flow. The public loves talking about glamorous businesses because glamorous businesses flatter the ego. They make the owner feel visionary. They make the customer feel modern. They make the conversation sound bigger than it is. But when I think about the businesses that have quietly created fortunes for people with no famous parents, no extraordinary luck, and no need to tell dramatic stories at dinner, I keep finding the same thing. They are boring, painfully boring, simple enough that sophisticated people dismiss them, ordinary enough that the average person never notices what is hiding inside them, repetitive enough that they do not produce the emotional stimulation modern culture has trained people to crave. That is exactly why they work so well. The source document you gave me opens with this same core insight. It argues that making hundreds of millions is not necessarily complicated, and that a person can do extraordinarily well by finding a boring business and committing to it. It then walks through two broad categories, property-oriented businesses and service-based businesses, and gives several specific examples, including ATMs, laundromats, equipment rental, HVAC towing, and waste management, followed by a short checklist for validating any boring business idea. Fay file site Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. I think the source is pointing at something very important. Not that every boring business is automatically good, not that the word boring itself is magic, but that economic value is often much more closely tied to repeatability than to novelty. That is what I want to explain, because once you understand that, the world looks completely different. You stop asking which business sounds coolest. You start asking which business is likely to keep getting paid when the owner is tired, when the economy gets weird, and when the customer still has a real need, even if he is no longer in the mood to spend on dreams. That is a far better question. Now, let me begin with a distinction the source makes that I think is correct. There are two broad families of boring cash flow businesses worth studying. The first family is property-oriented. These are businesses where assets, equipment, or physical locations do a meaningful part of the work. The second family is service-based. These are businesses where repeatable labor, process, route density, and local reputation create the value. Both families can work, both can fail, both can make people rich, but they do not behave the same way. Property businesses tend to attract people who want the dream of passive income. That dream is powerful. A machine sits there, a building sits there, a customer inserts money, swipes a card, or rents a space, cash appears. It sounds wonderfully civilized. No speeches, no big brand strategy, no social media content calendar, no influencer nonsense, just money arriving through a physical system that continues performing its task. There is real beauty in that. But there is also a trap. People hear the phrase passive income and stop thinking. Nothing important in business is truly passive in the way the public imagines. The machine still breaks. The location still matters. The customer still drifts if the service degrades. Cash still has to be collected, accounted for, protected, and reinvested. Repairs still appear. Bad locations still stay bad. Competition still matters. So I do not evaluate a property business by how passive it sounds. I evaluate it by something more serious. Does it collect low-drama payments for solving an ordinary recurring problem? That is the heart of it. Let us take the first example from your source. ATMs. The source tells the story of Paul Alex, a retired San Francisco police officer who started with one ATM in a nail salon after investing roughly $2,100 in 2018. That first machine reportedly produced about $500 a month in profit. He kept his day job, expanded gradually, and by 2021 had built his operation to more than 30 ATMs, generating over $10,000 a month in profit, eventually growing his broader company into a much larger enterprise. The source emphasizes two practical lessons from that story. Start small and get the location right, then maintain the machine well so it never becomes useless. Faithfully cite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. Now why is that interesting? Not because it is glamorous, because it solves a real behavior pattern. People still need cash in specific environments. If the machine is in the right place and works consistently, the customer is not engaging in a philosophical debate when he uses it. He is simply solving a small immediate problem. That is what I mean by low drama. No one schedules a family meeting to decide whether to use the ATM at a nail salon, a bar, or a busy cash-dependent store. That matters. Low-drama purchases or usage patterns are extraordinarily valuable because they reduce the friction between demand and payment. And low friction is one of the hidden engines of cash flow. Now, would I tell every viewer to run out and buy an ATM? Of course not. The lesson is not the machine. The lesson is the pattern. A machine in the wrong place is a dead asset. A machine that is empty when needed is a dead asset. A machine that is broken is a dead asset. A machine you cannot service fast enough becomes an embarrassment instead of an income stream. That is why the source is correct to highlight location and maintenance as the key operating realities. A low-drama business is still a real business. You do not get to skip operations just because the customer interaction looks simple. Fay Felicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. This is one reason the public misreads boring businesses. They think simple means easy. Simple often only means understandable. That is enough for me. I would much rather operate something understandable than chase some complicated, fashionable idea whose economics are still pretending to form. Now consider laundromats. This category is even more misunderstood because people have heard just enough to become dangerous. The source notes an industry claim of a 95% success rate for laundromats, nearly double the rough 50% average, often cited for businesses in general. It also explains why laundromats look so appealing from the outside: good location, machines, customers, payment collection, and a sense that once it is up and running, the machine itself does much of the work. At the same time, the source rightly warns that laundromats are not passive fantasies. The owner is still responsible for machine maintenance, collections, cleanliness, and most importantly, finding the right location. It also points out that scaling laundromats often takes more capital than people expect. Fay Felicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. That is a much better way to talk about this business than the internet usually does. Laundry is one of the purest recurring needs in modern life. Clothes do not care about the news. They still get dirty renters without in-unit machines, still need access. Families with home units still sometimes need oversized loads handled somewhere else. That means the demand can be durable. But durable demand is not the same thing as owner success. The owner still has to maintain the quality of the environment. The owner still has to keep machines operational. The owner still has to make the location convenient enough that habit forms. This is another truth about boring businesses that people miss. The less emotional the purchase, the less room you have for annoying the customer. The customer is not loyal because he loves you. He is loyal because the service works. If it stops working, his loyalty often disappears instantly. That is why the operator matters so much. The beautiful thing about laundromats when run correctly is that they can convert a dull recurring human need into a steady payment stream with very little need for storytelling. The dangerous thing is that people hear that and think the business is practically a vending machine for quarters. Number it is an operating business with powerful economics only if the operator respects the boring details that make it function. Now we come to a category I think is particularly interesting because it exposes how much money hides in urgency equipment rental. This part of the source felt very real to me because it uses a direct operating example. The narrator describes an air compressor at his Salt Lake City plant breaking during COVID, being told a replacement would take 3 weeks, and then finding a local rental company that could supply a diesel compressor within hours for $500 a day. That experience pushed him to study the rental equipment business. He then lays out the larger thesis. Companies often need equipment they do not have on site right now. And if you own the equipment and can deliver it quickly, they will pay a premium. He also notes the tax efficiency of buying a piece of equipment, renting it out, and writing off the cost while earning rental income. Fay Felicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. That is a very powerful insight. Urgency is one of the best monetizable conditions in business. When a business is down, the customer is no longer buying a machine. He is buying continuity. He is buying hours. He is buying the right not to lose more money. That is a much stronger motivation than ordinary shopping. This is why I always tell people to look for businesses that sell pain relief rather than aspiration. Aspiration is fragile. Pain relief is durable. A broken compressor is pain. A rented replacement is relief. And because the rental business sits between operational failure and business continuity, it can often command much better economics than a casual observer would guess. Again, however, I would never call it easy. You still need the equipment. You still need to maintain the equipment. You still need logistics. You still need the right inventory in the right territory. You still need customer acquisition. The source is correct that a beginner would be wise to start small and learn the actual ropes before betting everything. Fay Felicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. That advice is more universal than people realize. Most good boring businesses begin with a very simple principle. Do not go all in before you understand what actually drives the money. Now that brings me to the second family of boring cash flow businesses, service businesses, and this is where I think the upside becomes much larger for the person who is willing to work through systems. Hiring local marketing and process discipline rather than hide behind capital intensity. The source makes a strong claim here. It says that if you want to make thousands, property businesses can do that, but if you want to make millions or billions, service businesses often scale better because they cost less to start and have much greater upside. If you get the system right, that distinction is important. Property businesses can be wonderful. But many service businesses offer a different kind of leverage. They let you start lean, prove demand quickly, and then build route density, team structure, and local brand authority without needing heavy capital for every step. Fay file site Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay, I think that is exactly right. And the source then gives an example close to home for the speaker. HVAC. The narrator explains that after building his air filter company, he saw the opportunity in HVAC and partnered with a former Goldman Sachs friend to start an HVAC business. He argues that this kind of service is attractive because it is capital light compared with many property businesses, but requires knowledge and systems to scale. He specifically says that if he were starting from scratch without money, he would likely go to trade school, learn the trade well, maybe work for a successful operator first, and then start locally with a focus on becoming the best in one community before expanding outward. He also points out that many local operators still underuse modern customer acquisition channels while overspending on older marketing like billboards and radio. Fay Filicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay, that is excellent business thinking, not because HVAC is magical, because it has several qualities I deeply respect. The customer has a real need. The need is urgent, the service is local, the operator can start in one geography, the operator can improve margins with systems. The operator can scale through process, training, and marketing rather than only through giant capital outlays. That is a serious combination. Now, I do not think every viewer should start an HVAC business, but I do think the HVAC example reveals a deeper rule. A great service business usually has 4 qualities. The pain is real. The service is necessary. The purchase decision happens locally. The operator can get better faster than the market around him. That 4th point is the one people miss. In many local service markets, the incumbents are not strong because the economics are bad. They are weak because they have been allowed to stay weak for decades. Their marketing is outdated. Their response times are poor. Their customer communication is sloppy. Their systems are thin. Their online presence is weak. That creates openings. The source is right that focus is critical here. It references Domino. Beginning by mastering one college town, Ypsilanti, Michigan, learning exactly what that local market wanted, and only then expanding. The lesson is that hyperlocal dominance can become the foundation for broader scale. Fay Filicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay, that is how real scaling works more often than people like to admit. First one neighborhood, then one town, then one cluster, then one system applied repeatedly. This is what I mean when I say boring businesses are often easier to scale than sexy ones, not because they are easier in effort, because the feedback loops are clearer. Now the source gives another service example that I love because it strips away almost all glamour towing. The narrator tells the story of one of the richest men in Talladega, Alabama, an unassuming local operator in the emergency tow truck business who made particularly strong money when 18-wheelers broke down on the interstate and needed specialized towing fast. The source's point is direct. This man did not need a complicated product. He needed the right equipment, the right service area, and the ability to respond when urgency was highest. It notes that this can be started with one truck and one service area, then scaled by adding trucks and coverage, while also warning about the obvious operational burdens such as equipment maintenance and qualified drivers. Fay Filicite Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay, that is one of the cleanest examples of a high-value, boring service you will ever see. Why? Because the customer is not shopping for identity. He is not trying to feel sophisticated. He has a problem, and the problem is expensive every minute it continues. If the operator is the one who can solve the problem fastest, the price conversation becomes very different. This is what I mean when I say urgency changes the economics. A boring business with urgency can be extremely powerful. Again, not easy. Powerful. This is a distinction the modern audience keeps refusing to make. People think a good business should either be passive or easy or glamorous or instantly scalable. A good business should have conditions under which solving the problem is worth a lot to the customer. Everything else is secondary. Now, I was also pleased that the source included waste management. This is the kind of business people rarely talk about because it seems too industrial, too dirty, too logistical, too unromantic, which is precisely why it deserves attention. The source tells the story of Patrick Dovigi and the creation of GFL, describing how he started by managing small Ontario waste management companies and then expanded aggressively through acquisitions, eventually winning a Toronto trash collection contract and building GFL into one of the major waste companies in North America. It also emphasizes the core appeal of the industry, Homes and businesses always need trash collected. The challenges are real, including environmental concerns, local competition, and operational intensity. But the demand is stable and enormous. The source encourages a would-be operator to study the local market carefully and identify the specific service gap rather than dreaming about dominating the whole national industry from day one. Fay file site Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. Again, the pattern repeats. Recurring need, low drama purchase decision from the customer S side. Huge market operational complexity that scares away unserious people. Potential local wedge. That is exactly the kind of field where fortunes get built. Now, I want to stop listing examples and pull out the real operating rules because that is what matters. The source ends with a checklist, and I think the checklist is the most important part of the entire document. It says the first step to running a boring business has nothing to do with how much you make, but how much you spend. It tells the story of a man named John who started a window cleaning business with almost nothing more than a squeegee, a bucket, and soap, eventually building it into a business doing around $10 million in revenue at 40% net margins. It emphasizes the value of starting lean, learning the process yourself, and then later building systems from actual knowledge of the work. It also stresses the importance of validating demand before making heavy investments. Using examples like dropshipping air filters before building manufacturing capacity or running ads to see if a service offer converts before building out the full back end. Finally, it returns to local focus, saying that expanding too quickly dilutes attention and that narrow focus is often the real advantage in the early stage. Fay file site Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay, that is the playbook. And it is a very good one. So let me translate it into the way I would explain it. First, start cheap, not because being cheap is morally superior, because cost is risk. The more capital you burn before proving the machine, the more fragile your whole life becomes. I would rather start with a bucket and a squeegee and know whether customers really want the service than spend $50,000 building a miniature empire for a business that has not earned the right to exist yet. Second, validate before building. This is one of the greatest differences between mature operators and dreamers. Dreamers love building the whole castle because the castle flatters them. Operators want evidence first. Evidence beats enthusiasm every single time. The air filter example in the source is perfect. Low-margin dropshipping came first, not because it was glamorous, but because it answered the only question that mattered at that stage. Will customers buy? Once that answer was yes and yes again. Then building the factory made sense. Fay file site Fay turn 79 file 0 Fay. That is how sane risk-taking works. Proof first, scale later. Third, dominate local before fantasizing about broad. This rule applies far beyond business. It applies to attention, money, and life itself. Master one zone, one offer. One customer type, one route, one neighborhood. One system, then expand. The reason this works is simple. Complexity compounds faster than most people can manage. Focus is defensive. Focus keeps you alive. And survival is underrated. Most people are so eager to look large that they die small. Now let me say something else. The source makes clear, even if it does not put it this way. Boring businesses are often not valuable because they are boring. They are valuable because they are tied to low-variance human behavior. That is the real treasure. People need clean clothes, they need working air systems, they need broken vehicles moved, they need trash picked up, they buy snacks when waiting, they need windows cleaned in commercial settings, they need tools and equipment when operations cannot stop. That is the pattern. Low-variance human behavior. This is what makes a business durable. Not the founder's energy, not the marketing voice, not the narrative on social media. Human behavior. If the need comes back predictably enough, you can build something around it. And that means the smartest question a person can ask when evaluating a business is often this. Will people keep needing this in a boring, repetitive, emotionally uninteresting way next month, next year, and next decade? That question rules out a shocking amount of nonsense. It also highlights the things that matter. Now, I want to give a warning because people can take the boring businesses or great lesson and turn it into another empty slogan. Not every boring business is good. Some are poorly located. Some are over-leveraged, some are mispriced, some are impossible to improve, some are full of deferred maintenance, some are in declining micro-markets, some are being sold by owners who understand exactly why the next phase will be harder than it looks. Boring does not remove the need for judgment. It only improves the odds that if your judgment is decent and your discipline is strong, the customer side of the equation will not collapse from boredom or fashion. That is a huge advantage. But it is still only an advantage. You still need to think. You still need to inspect. You still need to verify. You still need to understand why this owner wants out. You still need to know the difference between recurring demand and guaranteed success. That is why the real lesson here is not to worship boring. It is to use boring as a filter. If a business is boring and necessary and local and repetitive and understandable and startable without suicidal capital requirements. Now, I am interested, That is a much more intelligent posture than chasing whatever the internet currently calls opportunity. The internet is in the excitement business. You are trying to build a life. These are not the same project. So if I were advising someone today, someone ordinary, someone without a huge inheritance or a giant salary or a network of venture capital friends, I would tell them this: stop asking what business sounds exciting. Start asking which payment streams happen every month, whether people feel inspired or not. Stop asking how to look like a founder. Start asking what simple economic machine can be bought, built, or controlled at a size you can actually survive. Stop treating small cash flow as disappointing. $1,000 a month that does not require your body every hour is not a small thing. It is the beginning of independence. Stop fantasizing about scale before you can dominate one lane. And stop believing that being unglamorous means being unimportant. The truth is often the opposite. The world you want may not be bought by a brilliant idea. It may be bought by owning the dull thing other people keep using and never bother to think about. That is not a small lesson. That is one of the deepest money lessons there is. And if I had to reduce the entire source document to one sentence, it would be this: the people who quietly get rich are often the ones who stop trying to impress the world and start owning the repetitive little payments the world keeps making, no matter what mood it is in. That is a much better business model than most people will ever admit. And it works.